Hello, I'm Roger, and I'd like to tell you a very short story which I heard many years ago, called very simply Chin Lin. Once upon a time there was a beautiful woman named Chin Lin. Each day before sunrise she pedalled her bicycle through the soft turquoise blue twilight of pre-dawn to her job at the Red Dragon Chinese restaurant. There she was employed as a baker and as a waitress. But her most important work was neither of these. It was the writing of fortunes for the fortune cookies that she baked each day. Each morning, Chin Lin unlocked the back door of the darkly deserted, silent kitchen of the Chinese restaurant. Taking a straw mat from a closet, she walked to the centre of the kitchen and unrolled the mat, facing the single window that opened to the east. She bowed deeply and took her place on the mat. Surrounded by ovens, stoves, work tables and racks of pots and pans, she prayed. Each day before her work began or the others arrived, she entered into meditation as the sun rose slowly on the rooftops of the city. 20 or perhaps 30 minutes later, as the kitchen was filled with the yellow warmth of sunrise, she arose, bowed deeply, and replaced her mat in the closet. Seated at one of the kitchen tables, she took pen in hand and began to write. Usually the fortunes came quickly, in a rush of words. Unknown faces formed on the empty white paper, and each fortune she wrote was uniquely personal. For Chin Lin, there were no anonymous fortunes. It took only a few swift moments, and she was finished. Chin Lin was inspired. By this time, the narrow alley outside the restaurant was bubbling with bustle and noise, garbage trucks, delivery vans, and the arrival of her fellow workers. The day at the Red Dragon Chinese restaurant had begun. Soon the kitchen too was filled with activity. The fat, jolly, Buddha-looking cook switched on his transistor radio as Chin Lin carefully placed the small white pieces of folded paper with their individual fortunes into the cookie dough that she had prepared. The sounds of American folk rock blended with the banging of pots and pans as wonton soup and sweet and sour pork began to be prepared. With a mystic smile, Chin Lin slipped her tray of fortune cookies into the hot oven. Much later in the day, her baking finished, she changed clothing. She took off her working clothes and put on her waitress uniform. Then she left the busy kitchen exploding with the aromas of roasting duck, pineapple, soy sauce and fried rice. Now, Chin Lin was no ordinary waitress, as I'm sure you have already guessed. Her vocation in life was to be a messenger. As a waitress, however, she appeared and acted like any other waitress in any other Chinese restaurant. When the dinner guests finished their meal and were sipping their tea, she would come and clear away their dishes, bowing and smiling to their compliments about the marvellous meals that were customary at the Red Dragon. During the meal, Chin Lin would carefully watch each of the guests in the dining room, watch them with her third eye, the inner eye of the heart, which she opened each morning in her meditation. Having completed their meal, she would carefully select from her collection of cookies the correct one for each guest. Since she had baked them, she knew which fortune was inside which cookie. Now her heart filled to the brim with reverence and awe. She would place in front of each guest a small blue and white plate decorated with ancient Chinese characters. In the centre of each plate was a single, lone fortune cookie. The following scene rarely changed. With smiles and jokes, the dinner guests would break open their cookies and read their fortunes. With some prompting from one another, they would share what was written on the tiny pieces of paper. Laughter and some discussion followed as the small messages about the future were casually placed beside the empty teacups. With the broken fortune cookies left on the plate, the guests would rise and leave. This evening, that pattern changed. Chin Lin had waited on a young couple in their early 20s as they enjoyed a dinner of sweet and sour shrimp. At the end of their meal, she carefully selected their fortunes and served them. They both opened them and, reading them to each other, smiled. The young woman then rose and excused herself to visit the toilet. While she was gone, the young man read and reread his fortune, and then quickly placed the small white paper in his mouth and ate it. Next, he took a tiny bite from his fortune cookie and placed the remainder of it in his pocket. As his date returned, he rose and together they left the restaurant. Chin Lin was filled with great joy because she knew that he had understood the secret. You see, fortunes come true for those who believe in them. At weight machines, fortune tellers and Chinese restaurants, people read their fortunes, smile and say, "Wouldn't that be nice?" Then they put that fortune aside and return to their dull daily lives. They leave their fortunes and their futures to others, to the fates or Lady Luck. But Chin Lin knew, she knew what others did not. She knew that fortunes are surrounded by the food necessary to make them come true. Each fortune must be fed, and in her ancient Chinese recipe for cookies was found the essence of life. The cookies that surrounds the fortune or wish was like the fruit that surrounds the seeds of an apple. The function of the fruit of the apple is to be food for the seeds contained in its heart. Each wish and each fortune, like a seed, is life. Where there are no wishes, there is no life. Chin Lin smiled as she remembered the fortune that she had written for the young man. The small white slip of paper he had eaten had written on it, "You will die a happy man." That night at the restaurant he had wondered, perhaps I will die tonight. If so, I must make this the most beautiful, love-filled night of my life. He did not die. And the next morning he rose, recalled the mystic message, and took another small bite from the fortune cookie which he had placed with great care in the top drawer of his dresser. Days followed days, weeks collected on top of weeks, and years passed in procession as each morning he wondered, perhaps I will die today. Each day he took a bite of the fortune cookie, yet somehow there never was an end to it. The cookie was never completely consumed. It was both mystical and magical. Daily he focused his energies on being happy, for he never knew whether this might be the day of his death. 60 years after that dinner date at the Red Dragon Chinese restaurant, he died peacefully in his sleep. At his wake, everyone, and he had an army of friends, said the same thing. Without a doubt, he was the happiest man I ever knew.